First off, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about when you first took on this character in the first season, because I've heard you mention that there was a scene very early on, I think it was the dead opossum, that Wendy just picked up and threw, and there was no question mark as to her action in that moment. She wasn't slighted by that, and that it really rooted so much back into her childhood and her upbringing for you. But it also shows an impulsiveness, the survivalism that we came to know and love about her. And so how did reading a scene like that early on really open up the space in which you saw to be able to play this character and the types of choices you were able to make?
Well, I had made some, original decisions about her at the beginning, but I didn't really have a real clear idea of who she was and where she came from. And that was the scene where everything just sort of clicked into place for me. Because they'd written that scene, and I thought, how does she know how to do that? Why is she not afraid of that dead animal? And then all of a sudden I started to realize, oh, she knows how to talk to all these people in a different way from anyone else in her family. And then it all just clicked. I was like, oh, she's from someplace like this. Why does she not want to move there? Why does she not want to go there? I'm like, oh, she's going back to something that she knows. So, and then from there, I was able to sort of really build things, and it just all sort of just clicked into place for me. It became very clear about her motivations, what they were, who she was, why she responded and was so sort of primal and reactive.
And one of the elements which was always so fascinating in watching her as a character is the fact that her line of morality was always changing. It was an ever-moving target. But there's such a challenge in playing a character like that episodically, where you don't initially know how many seasons you're going to have to push it for, because just because she wouldn't make a choice now doesn't mean that she wouldn't a few episodes from now or a season from now. And so how did you approach the challenge of always making it a moving target, but always leaving yourself space to go to?
Well, because I had done a series prior to this, which had lasted several seasons, I knew sort of what it is, and it is difficult, and it is the biggest challenge, at least for me, doing a series that lasts many years, because you don't know what's coming. So you can't paint yourself into a corner. But at the same time, you don't want to play things generically, because then who cares? And then it's just sort of not fun. So I talked to Chris Mundy, our amazing showrunner, at the very beginning, and I said, if we can make this, at least for Wendy's character, about identity and her identity, and who is she and who is she not, and then I was like, that gives me a wide range, but still specific. So I rooted everything in that, and then once I realized where she was from, then it clicked in even more. And the primary thing really for her is just survival. And I think she was predetermined, or she had previous experience with survival. So it just clicked in and went into Miracle Grow. She sort of.
And there's elements of the survivalism which also transcend over to an impulsiveness in her.
Oh, yeah.
And the wonderful thing about a role like that is it almost means that no choice is a wrong choice in terms of your performance. And so what was that like, spending several seasons playing a character where ultimately you could go in any possible direction?
It was fantastic just to be reactive and not and have the freedom to do that. And then also once we introduced that there was mental illness in the family, then that really let me go all over the place. And being able to sort of cap that until after Tom Pelphrey's character was gone. So you really didn't quite see it to the degree until after she was gone that there was this inherited gene. Then it was really, the gloves were off, and then you can just go all over the place, and it's very freeing when you realize you sort of can't, exactly what you said, you can't make a wrong move. And that's the joy when you have really good writing and really good people, and you sort of try as much as you can, sort of create a sort of arc for yourself. And a lot of television, I find in the past, it's very hard to do that because it's not, the showrunners and the writers are not as collaborative as you want them to be. And at least, with this show, which I already am I'm still in mourning that it's over. It was wonderful to have all of that and just this collaborative feeling, and then giving us the information so that we could actually craft something. It was really, for all of us, it was great.
It's also so fascinating to watch a character who at times is very controlled with her emotions, and at other times things come to the surface that she's not intending to. Obviously, we get all the quiet moments behind closed doors. And so when you would be working with the scripts and working on scenes in advance of filming, how were you approaching finding what's the emotion for her on the surface and then what's the subtext play underneath for her?
Some of that was predetermined and some of it you just get there on the day, and Jason would look at me in a certain way and, something would happen, or she would see something, or her daughter would make her angry, or she'd look at something that she thought was beautiful, or she'd have a moment of kindness or a connection, or, so it really, the thing that's great is that once everything is sort of in place, it really does takes a life of its own, and you just get out of the way.
And you bring up obviously the wonderful Jason Bateman, and there's moments where there's such clear, genuine love in their own way and affection in that marriage, and then there's moments for both of them where there's transactional instances for each of them, and they just need each other to get through the next moment. And
they hate each other at times. I mean, it swings, like any very intense marriage. They love each other and they hate each other. And they blame each other for things, and there's long-term resentments, and but yet they've grown up together. And the thing that I always thought was interesting from the very beginning is that you had a family who functioned well together, but they didn't know each other. They really didn't know each other at all, none of them. So what happened over the 4 seasons, it was like, oh, that's who you are? Oh, hi. And with the children as well as the parents.
I mean, and there's always this idea that every single one of her choices roots back to who she was at the beginning of the show, and it felt like that was always in her. Would you be consciously still thinking back to that version of her and rooting it in that, or did it just become very instinctual?
No, it just sort of, went on its way.
And how did a lot of the preparation for you change over the years? Because obviously at the beginning you're developing and asking questions of this character, and then as you spend more time living and breathing in her, you instinctively know certain choices. And so how did the preparation that you would do for specific scenes or episodes evolve and change?
Well, I'm a nerdy actor. I mean, I'm a nerdy McNerdster. Everybody prepares very, very differently, and that's one of the fantastic things. Like, the two of us could not be more different, and we work together beautifully, and I love every move he makes. But we prepare very differently, and I think because I'm from the theater and because I'm the daughter of a playwright, I go script, and I break down the script, and I get out my Post-its, and I get my highlighter pen, and and then I start to see where thematic things happen. And if something is well written, once you sort of take it all apart, you can see how it's put together. And then you're like, oh, okay, this is where the writer wants this to happen. And once that sort of reveals itself, it's like a map, or it's like directions, really. It sort of tells you like which way they want you to go. And then you think, well, do I play it that way, or do I play the opposite? Do I what's going to be the most effective thing for the character, for the story, for the plot, for the narrative? How does it all work? And I just find that stuff fun. I mean, really fun. Yeah.
I mean, I remember when Tom Pelfrey joined the show, he was talking about how he would come over at weekends and you would be walking him through that. What were some of the things that you were excited to instill in him or share with him coming into the show?
Well, you just show someone your nerdy work, and I make all these boards and I do all this stuff, and so it was fun to share it with someone who was interested, and and it's just interesting to see like how things come together. Like, in some ways it is sort of magical, and then in other ways there's a lot of work that goes in behind it. It's not, I think some people have this misconception that it's like instant pudding, that you just show up and you do it, and that's just not. It's not add water and go. It's really not. I mean, for some people it is, and for those rare creatures, I mean, that's amazing. I'm not one of those people. I wouldn't want to be one of those people either, because I really love the digging in part. So.
And it also sounds like this was a unique experience in the fact that you would know where Wendy's arc was going season through season before you went into shooting. What difference did that make in the way that you could be very judicious about what am I going to show, what am I going to reveal, when am I going to reveal this?
Well, it was huge, because it relieved me of a lot of pressure. I was like, okay, well, if I know that that's happening in episode 10, I don't have to worry about that. But yet I do have to plan for it. I do have to eke it up, the energy up just a little bit, so that when 10 comes, it hits and it lands the way that it should. So I was never taken by surprise, so I had the time to sort of figure out when to when to let things be on the back burner, when to slowly move them forward, and then the stuff that surprises you along the way. Then they're the things that you just don't know are going to happen.
Right, because even all of the choices that you make with her and all the places you take her, a lot of times you have to also be able to bring her back to her center. So the last season when she was facing losing her kids, that was a place of extreme vulnerability and anxiety for her as a character. But ultimately, in knowing the arc that she was going on, how did you play to a choice like that, taking to her to one of her lowest points, but knowing that you had to be able to bring her back from it?
At that point, we'd been together for 4 seasons, and I love those kids. So that's where the joy of being in a really good job with really good people pays off, is that stuff is just sort of there. You just have to look at them, and it's, so that's that.
Yeah. And you were mentioning before that obviously there was the exploration of mental health within her family, and that opened up the character a little bit more in different ways as well. What were some of the choices that you brought into her as a result of that narrative?
Well, I think just that, it's established that Tom's character had bipolar disorder, so there's the sense of that, and then there's just the symptoms of bipolar and how you can, what that kind of does, and the sort of, and how you can be very animalistic with, human impulse. And it allows you to do all the things that you were saying before. It allows you to, and then she's really smart. She's not mature. So once I made the decision very early on that this was a very immature person, a smart, shrewd, impulsive, reactive person who had no maturity at all. I mean, she just didn't. So to sort of strip that out of a character, but keep shrewdness, was fun and a challenge.
Yeah. And obviously this final season, you were finally coerced after many seasons of everybody trying to encourage you to direct. What did you love about taking yourself out of your comfort zone, but doing it in a place that felt very safe and had a real safety net?
Well, I was lucky because it was an ideal situation, because it was a crew who I had known for years. It was actors who I'd worked with for years, so I knew all their tricks. I knew how to push them in directions that maybe they didn't want to go or didn't think they could go. So it was the ideal situation to be in, because I just felt this wave of support. I get very emotional whenever I think, particularly the crew. The crew was they were fantastic. And I just sort of broke down the whole script the way that I do for me with every character. So I'm just glad I didn't mess it up. I was so relieved I didn't completely make everyone regret that they had forced me to do this.
So it was a bulk order of Post-it notes and poster board.
It was a lot, yeah. There was a lot of nerdy behavior going on.
And I've heard you mention that part of the inroad in directing that episode as well was that realization this episode is really centered around Marty. And so how did that influence a lot of the choices that you were making with the camera and how you told the story?
Well, I wanted it to be a thing of suspense where the vice was just tightening on him all the way through, so that he just had no place to go but to explode. And when I first saw the script, it was a lot of meetings. It was a lot of people, what we call in the theater French scenes, people coming together, having a meeting, information being exchanged and leaving. And I was like, well, how? And then that car thing at the end, I was like, how am I going to do that? So once I made the real decision that this was Jason's episode, and so then I sort of built everything around that, so that really there was a progression following him through, and everything around it would help move that trajectory forward.
And when you first started on the show as well, I mean, it's got such a beautiful tone dramatically, but it's also constantly just slowly building this tension and suspense that you don't even notice building inside as you're watching it until it explodes. Is it helpful for you to think about the tone of the show in that way as a performer, or really just focus on character and the choices you're making?
It's really it's always script to me. It's like, just do what the script says. And there'll be moments even in the script where there's something that's surreal, or something that's ridiculous, or something that's funny, or I loved picking the music for that last scene. What great love song is going to be playing while that's all going down. And just the surreal quality of when someone loses it like that. when someone like Marty Byrde really just snaps. And we've been waiting for him to do that for 4 seasons.
And you mentioned earlier that this is obviously about a family who don't know each other as well at the beginning, and then certain things bring a lot out to the surface. But also for Wendy as an individual, it's an exploration of her relationship with herself and things that she didn't realize about herself. And so as you were working towards that finish line with her, what's the relationship that you wanted her to have with herself by the end?
Oh boy. I think some sense of accountability, but yet glee at survival. I think, I love the sort of the introduction, of her brother and then her father who comes in, and, I think there was a sense that, and I wanted her to step into herself. I wanted her to fully be who she was and be comfortable with who she was, regardless of how dubious her character is. I mean, she's just, not a great person, but she was herself. She really stepped into honestly be who she was. And that was really the trajectory all the way through. With someone who didn't know themselves, didn't know who they were, wasn't really honest, and then got to a point of authenticity with their own identity. Yeah.
I really, really love that. Well, we have a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, and then if we have time, we will come to you guys in the room as well for some more questions. So the first one's from Vivian Banning Sheffel, who's asking, what didn't your training as an actor prepare you for in working on this show?
Well, that's a general good question. What training does not prepare you for is working at 4 in the morning. I mean, honestly, I have to do a monologue at 4 in the morning. Are you kidding? I can't see straight. How can I remember my lines? Acting in the cold, acting in the extreme heat. It's those things. It's the real production tough stuff that you don't think about. I have to be in wig and makeup and corsets for how long? 14 hours a day? I mean, that's what, those shows are. In the theater, it's maybe 4 hours. No, 14, what? So it's the physical demands of being able to do what you do under difficult circumstances, under circumstances you never even think about. Yeah. I've got to go stand in freezing cold water and do what? And everyone's, depending upon me to do it and do it well. So it's that stuff.
I love that answer. Our next question is from Rachel Kasich, who said, you've played Wendy for 5 years, in 44 episodes to be exact on Ozark. How has Wendy changed the life of you as Laura?
Oh, nice. What a sweet question. I think that's a nice question. I think really it confirmed for me that it really is possible to have a job like that. Particularly in television, because television is not easy. And television is not always about the creative, and it's not always about, people try to be as caring as they can be, but it's not really high on the priority, because it is a business, and it is a thing, and it's a brand, and it's a product, and it's all of that stuff, which it is. You need to respect that part of it. But this show was run by such great people, and thank you, Netflix. Because that started it, MRC, and then just everyone who was in charge of it was so good at their job and treated us all so well. We had just the best time, and we generally adored each other. So it confirmed my faith that good jobs like this are possible, because when you have 3 stinkers in a row, and you're not treated well, and you feel bad about yourself and your work and everyone around you, it can be really demoralizing. So if things like this sort of strengthen your spine, and they make you go, oh no, it is possible. I'm not crazy. It is possible for this to happen. If things are curated correctly, if they're in the right hands of people, then you can, provide the business responsibilities that you need to a larger company, and you can have an artistically fulfilling experience and have a good time. So that's what it did.
Yeah, that's so great. I think we have time to take 1 or 2 questions in the room, and I believe there's a microphone that is going to be coming. So if you have a question, feel free to put your hand up. Here. Got one down at the front here.
Hi. So I'm from Brazil, yes. And Ozark is huge there. And one of the questions that I have every time that I'm watching the show is, in these 4 seasons, 5 years on this character, what has surprised you the most about her?
Nothing really, because she's so all over the place, so I knew that anything was sort of possible with her behavior and her tone and so nothing really surprised me. I was delighted a lot of times just to see how crazy it could all go and how we could still sort of maintain a sense of reality and have a plot that really did have a mission to it. So, but again, I think the surprise was really more about how the production was so well run. I mean, that was what was so surprising for me.
Nice to meet you.
Hey.
In general, you have this ability to etch these amazing sibling relationships on screen.
Isn't that funny?
Of Ozark, but I'm also thinking of You Can Count on Me.
Yeah. And Savages and Love Actually, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
You've done so many of them. So
I know.
how do you do it?
Funny.
Why do they all feel so real and
Isn't
wonderful?
that funny? I know, and I don't have a brother. I know, I have all these fantastic cinematic brothers. There's a whole group of them now, and I love them to pieces. I don't know what that is. I really don't. I've thought about that myself, and I can remember at one point I've had a representative who was like, "Oh, you don't want to do that movie because it's another sibling relationship." I was like, "Well, but it's a different sibling relationship. It's okay. Like, don't be scared of that. It's going to be wildly different from anything else." So it's fun to look back on and look at all of those relationships. I'm in touch with all of them, but it's fun. I don't know why it works for me, but it seems to. I've been lucky. I think it's more about the men playing my brothers than really me. I just lucked out with good people.
More, please.
Well, it has been truly phenomenal watching you play this character throughout the last few seasons of Ozark.
Thank
So congratulations on the incredible run of the show, and thank you so much.
Nice meeting you.